Virtual reality is taking the gaming industry and, now we've put it into education.
Schools have not evolved for literally, 50 to 100 years, it feels like.
You are rewarded for conforming in school.
Like, think about how many people can't read, how many people don't have emotional intelligence, how many people are suffering through so many different learning disabilities that the school system says, hey, listen, you're either not smart, you can't pay attention, you can't do these things, so we're going to give you a pill. Spirituality and capitalism belong together. Those thoughts, those feelings, that comes from something bigger than I am. And together I believe we can all grow. That's how we're going to change the world. That's how we're going to change the planet. All right, welcome to the Spiritual Capitalist. Today I'm sitting here with Kristin Elankowski, and I'm excited to have you here today. The main reason I'm excited to have you here is because you're going to be teaching us and talking with us with something that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is education. I absolutely love learning, and I hated, and I mean hated, school. If it wouldn't have been for the social interaction, if it wouldn't have been for some of the projects and even some of my teachers, I don't know how I would actually have graduated, and I actually barely graduated. And when we first met, I kept asking myself, I wonder if I would have been exposed to that type of learning, if that type of education, if I actually would have been able to gravitate and learn more. Now, I'm happy about my path because of where it led me. And I wonder how much more I could have learned and been, because when I was younger, I used to think I was really stupid. And that stuck with me for a really long time as an adult. So I'm curious to know more about your project, what it is that you're doing. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on here and share your vision and what you're creating and your passion for education.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. And I'm excited about talking about innovative education, because I agree. I think a lot of kids are in your shoes, where school has become boring, they don't feel challenged, they're not engaged, they're not interested. And it's really interesting. Education is one of those sectors that hasn't changed much in the last 100 years, where so many other parts of society have changed and have innovated. Education really hasn't. And one of my big frustrations, so I was involved in charter schools in the state of Utah for many years. I was on the state charter school board, and I was the chairman of the state charter school board. And one of my frustrations was, even in charter schools, which by nature should be more innovative, we weren't seeing as much innovation as I hoped. And so while I was the chairman of that board, I started an innovation committee to kind of talk about, why aren't we seeing more innovation in schools? And part of it is, the system. Part of it is trying something new. A part of it is, that people aren't willing to go out on a limb on education. And so a few years after that experience, I just serendipitously ran into someone I knew from being on the state charter school board, and she told me about virtual reality education. And I just, right when she said it, it's one of those moments where you kind of get chills and you think, oh, wow. I said, I love that idea. And so, time went by and we ended up partnering, and then we added some really great other partners. But what we're doing in Utah, and I'm really excited that Utah is innovative and that they were willing to go out on a limb and do an innovative idea. But we're opening a charter school in Utah next August, and it's called Virtual Horizons Charter School. And it's basically a virtual school that is funded by the state, that's going to give kids a whole different experience in school. And just like you said, you were bored and didn't think you were smart. And I've had kids that have gone through this too, my own children, where if you have ADHD, if you have any kind of, learning disability, you're just easily distracted. There's a lot of reasons why the typical education doesn't work for a lot of kids. And a lot of kids are just bored. They're just bored and they're not engaged. Virtual reality is taking the gaming industry and, now we've put it into education. And so kids are, it's like going on an amazing field trip every day. So in virtual reality, we can take kids into space, we can take them into the ocean, we can take them back to a historical event. We can have all sorts of experiences that you can't have in a regular classroom. And just what we know from the early research that's been done, this is new, but it's not brand new. So we do have some research on it, and we know that kids are more engaged, that they remember longer, they can recall. They don't even realize that they're learning. That's the exciting thing. So what you said is you knew, like, as you were sitting in class, you were bored and you got disengaged from learning. In virtual reality, you don't even realize you're learning. You're having an amazing experience.
So when I was doing a little bit of research on you, you did mergers and acquisitions before, correct?
I still do.
Oh, you still do mergers and acquisitions? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So you're still doing mergers and acquisitions. You were working with charter schools. And then you end up leaving the charter school because you were doing that for quite some time. And then you started to get into the innovation side. What made you decide, like, hey, listen, schools have not evolved for literally, I don't know, 50 to 100 years, it feels like, that the system needed to be broken slightly and changed?
Well, I think it's what I said, that there was this frustration that I knew we could be doing better for our kids. And I think just when you know there's a problem, but you're not willing to do anything about it yourself, then you're just part of the problem. And so I think for me, I knew there was a problem with a lack of innovation in education, but by not doing anything about it, then I'm just perpetuating the problem. So for me, it was just deciding this is something I've known in my soul for a long time, that education needs to change, that there needs to be reform in education. And it's not that there aren't well-meaning teachers and administrators and everybody involved in education wants what's best for the kids. It's just a system that's really hard to change and really slow to innovate. And so for me, it was thinking, if I don't do something, who is doing something? You know, so it was jumping in and saying, I want to help be a part of the change.
Yeah, when there's a problem and we see that there's a solution and we don't actually try to throw somebody out the life preserver when they're drowning, that does make us part of the problem. And so when I look at virtual reality and I look at schooling and I look at a lot of these things, are we at the point right now to where this is actually going to work? Because, you know, people, I'm sure they've been on different virtual reality platforms out there. There's quite a few of them these days, right? That you can go on and play like these little tiny video games or these little tiny lessons. But to take a child that is sitting at home, for one, because we saw during the pandemic, all these kids running around, nobody getting good grades, very distracted, trying to do learning from inside of from their computers at home, that it just it didn't seem to work. And a lot of kids, unfortunately, got left behind and, trying to now catch up to that time period of when, people were basically locked in their homes and parents were trying to be teachers, which, that's not what they're professionals at. Are we at that point now that technology's advanced enough that these kids are going to be able to sit inside a virtual reality and have these experiences, retain the information, and you're going to be able to test them to make sure they're retaining the information? Because this feels a little bit like a little bit of an experiment. And as I was talking to you earlier, I said, listen, I'd have been happy to have been part of that experiment, just because you said, the ADD and the focus, and that would have kept me like really engaged in that world. And my mind probably wouldn't have been running to a million other things, like what's the person next to me doing and what's going on over here? Because I was a kid, I would sit there in class and I would draw, but mainly what I would get in trouble for all the time is my parents would say, your teachers say that you just look out the window all day long and daydream. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm thinking about, these other things. I'm not paying attention to what's going on because it's not pulling my attention. It's not keeping me engaged enough. I mean, is there enough content that a child is going to be able to learn, for a full year inside of this virtual world?
Yes. And like I said, this isn't brand new technology. So we do have some research that's been done at some major universities. There's another charter school that is in virtual reality. It's a little bit different than ours, but we are talking with them and learning from them. So I understand the hesitation, but what we do know is that virtual reality is a more engaging way to learn. And we also know that kids are so distracted. They have their cell phones at school. They have things going on around them all the time. In virtual reality, you are so engaged because the equipment is making you stay engaged. You're in this experience. And because the graphics are getting better and the experiences are better, then it just has this way of just pulling you into the experience that you're having. We will be really diligent about keeping track of data and making sure we find the optimal time to keep kids in VR, and that we're going to have it synchronous, so they are with their teacher, they are with their class, so they'll be doing it with their teacher. And we don't expect that kids will be in longer than 20 or 30 minutes at a time. But you also can learn faster. What we've learned is that kids are getting a concept much quicker. And so not only are you, learning a concept quicker, but also kids who have fallen behind for whatever reason, we feel like that we can bring them up to speed faster.
What does the research show? Like you're saying that there's been a little bit of research done in this particular field. Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing you say is that we can learn quicker, and I'm hearing you say that it keeps our attention. Are you noticing, though, with test scores and those things that they're measuring, are we seeing that children before that they were involved in this type of experience, that they're able to continue learning and they're the word I'm actually looking for is that they're having higher test scores?
Yes, we're showing a higher increase of test scores. In our own, we did a pilot program in California about a year and a half ago, and even in that small group, we had 70% of the kids got 100% in end-of-level testing in that subject, which was science, and 100% of them got 90% or higher. That was much higher than their classmates. And so the research out of, I think it's University of Maryland, but I should have studied what research I was quoting on the show before I started. But it's about a 35 to 38% increase in test scores is what they found.
That's
and retention.
Massive.
Right. So we really feel like this is going to be, I get that we're first in Utah. We're only second in the country. And so we need to find innovative parents and innovative students that are willing to be part of this. But I really think the research is going to show that this is just a better way of learning, and that kids are going to learn faster, retain, score higher on tests. What we're doing right now is taking what's out there in virtual reality and curating classes and subjects that go along with the Utah State Core. And then we'll be able to teach those concepts that they will get tested on. And we're going to be really, like I said, really diligent about collecting that data, because we really feel like it's going to show a significant increase in test scores.
Mm. The fact that someone can get those, like that bump in their test scores is enough to be like, okay, well, I think there's a lot of people probably thinking, this might be a good idea if I was to look at this from myself or for children. The thing that keeps coming up to me is like this thing I keep seeing in my head. We've all seen the movie Wally World, right? Where people are like, tied into their device and they're when they're working. When VR first came out, there was programs that you could use to be able to work virtually in your computer from your virtual screen. And I attempted to do that for a while. Like I really was like, okay, if I could stay in this world, nothing is going to distract me. I can communicate with it. It's going to type what I see. I can run all of my projects through here. And I can put my music on and I'm 100% like in this environment. Nobody can bother me. And you're right. Time went by a lot faster. My head hurt a little bit because of the device, but it just didn't really work for me, right? It's just the technology I still don't believe is there for that. But what you're telling me is like, okay, so you have a teacher involved, you get in there and you start to take these lessons, and then you're tested on those lessons. And I'm guessing then you've probably got, instead of you curating all of your content, having a bunch of people behind the scenes writing you content, or instead of you doing it yourself, just like I would go out and license a book as an educator or as a school, I'm guessing you're doing the same things with these programs. But the concern I have is that I believe one of the greatest things of school is the social interaction that I have. Now, in virtual reality, you and I could be talking and I could be moving around and we could have that, but that is not, there's something about this heart to heart, this real communication, this physicality to things. How do you think that's going to play in, because I know you've had to be thinking about this, especially in studying psychology like you have. What do you think is going to happen here? That's why I say I feel like it's an experiment, because you're not actually around other children. And that's part of the involvement in society as we grow.
Right. That's something that we have thought a lot about, because I agree, there's nothing like in-person connection. And so we want to really figure out a way to build community in our school and have places where students can meet together, and where a community center or something in their town or something where our students can get together and meet in person. We also believe in nature and experiences. So we want to provide ways to have our students have experiences in nature. We've been talking to a nonprofit in Utah called Summit Journeys. We want to be able to take them on some adventures at the end of the school year together as a class. But I do think there's a connection in virtual reality that is even different than a connection on Zoom or any other online platform, because in virtual reality, you can walk up and have a one-on-one conversation. And kids will be able to study in small groups. And even in the pilot program that we did, we had a classroom in California, and they were together. And then we had a teacher in Florida, and then I'm joining the classroom from Utah. And I could walk up and ask the students, what do you think of this? What do you think of virtual reality? How do you like this classroom? And I could have one-on-one conversations with them. So while that's not in person and nothing can replace that, it's different than Zoom. So you can have more of a connection with your teacher, with your classmates in virtual reality than you can in any other online platform, I believe. So, and like I said, I studied friendship in my master's program. There's nothing like in-person connection.
You studied friendship.
I did.
Ooh, what is friendship? Like, I would love to jump into that. What is, like, we're obviously taking a big turn on this, because I think it's pretty basic. Like, from what I understand, just so that we're clear on this, it's virtual reality where children can engage and they're going to be able to learn. They're going to have a teacher there. It's offered by you now are a charter school in the state of Utah by 2025, I believe, correct? Mm-hmm. So you're getting ready to start in this new experience of yours. And I believe that, from what I understand, is that it doesn't cost anything to the student. Is that correct?
Correct. It is a public charter school, so it is funded by the state. So when a child signs up, we're going to start 4th through 8th grade. And so when a student signs up to be a part of our school, we will send them a Chromebook and a VR headset. We will also make sure they have good Wi-Fi, IT support. They'll have a homeroom teacher. You know, we're going to have a lot of, we'll have some training for the students and the parents. And we really are hoping to build community, to your point. So even though we're virtual, we really want to build community, and really we're going to focus on getting students from all parts of our state. That's the great thing about virtual reality. We're not limited to the best teachers just in a little area. We can get teachers throughout the state. We can get students throughout the state. We can get the best education that we can provide in rural areas and places where it's maybe harder to get teachers. So I think there's just going to be a lot of opportunity that we can provide that a regular traditional school can't. And so we're really excited about what's going to happen.
How soon do you see? So we had a gentleman on here, his name was Brandon, and he was working with VR, and I think you might actually know him, but he's working with VR to help PTSD and soldiers and all. And it would change based upon the way that their brains were thinking and what was going on. It would actually change the environment. How soon do you think that AI jumps in and starts teaching these children and gives them curated lessons? I know, because you and I have had conversations, the way that you think about business, the way you think about world, this has got to be something on the back of your mind going, this is actually where we're really going. This is where we're showing people we're going, but this is actually where we're headed.
I think AI is going to definitely play a part. And I think AI is going to play a part in all of our lives,
Everything.
right? We don't
Yep.
really know to what extent, but AI is going to play a part in all of our lives, but also in the virtual reality school, because what I think the real key that is missing in education is personalization. Because every kid learns at a different pace. Every kid learns, they really excel in one subject, but maybe not in another. I saw a study once on even math. If kids had the right amount of time to learn a subject and learn a concept, they would all do well in math. But because a classroom moves at a pace that works for some kids, but not for others. Some are bored because they're ahead, and some are so far behind that they can't catch up. And so where I think AI is exciting in education is we can figure out ways now to really personalize education for that student. So while you might be able to learn something in math faster than I can, maybe I can learn things in science faster than you can. And so we've always taught to one pace in school. And I think AI is going to help us be able to personalize education to each student. And that's what I'm most excited about for AI.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. So you have your headset on and you're doing class, right? Like, okay, put on your headset. You put on your headset, you see the things, you're in this world, right? Then you take it off. You have a screen over here that pops up and speaks to you and says, okay, now I'm going to walk you through an art project. And because it has a camera on it, it can sense and see what's going on and say, oh, no, just a little bit to the left. And by the way, if you add this color, and is helping individually create these curated lessons like you're talking about so that we can learn. And then we tie in the positive psychology things is every single time that feels like as if I accomplish something that I still get that synapsis, or I still get that dopamine effect of feeling like, man, I did something good, right? Because that's a reward to us.
Right.
And I also think about when you're in virtual reality, kids right now, their attention span is less and less. Our attention span is less and less.
Right.
TikTok is like this. I mean, I was blown away when somebody told me in the future, people will watch things that'll be 10 to 5 seconds long, and you have to get their attention that fast. And I thought, there's no way. That doesn't make any sense. Like commercials are, 30, 60 seconds, some of these, right? But now we're going to go down to 5 seconds. We're going 10 seconds. So when I'm in virtual reality and I'm doing this education stuff, do you worry that the ability to be able to get the reward will be so fast and so quick that this experience, because I know children that they are bored of this experience, they'd rather get into their video games than be in this experience?
Well, we're hoping that virtual reality education competes with the excitement of video games. It's like I said before, that they're going to be getting educated without even feeling like it's education. And what's also exciting about virtual reality is that we're hoping that kids, there'll be a synchronous aspect to it where they're with their teacher and they're learning core subjects, but we're hoping that they'll want to learn more about certain subjects. And VR will have lots of labs that they can explore, things that they can explore. And then also I think the exciting thing about AI is you can have tutors in AI.
Right.
If they don't understand something, if they don't get what was happening, and maybe the AI can even pick up on that. You didn't understand this. Let's go over this again. Let's do it in a different way so you understand it. We really are hoping no students get left behind, that AI helps improve education. And so I think the video games, the quick stimulation, all of that, we're playing to that. Whether right or wrong, it's the world that we live in. And, we could argue that sitting in a classroom for 7 hours listening to a teacher is the best way to get educated, but kids have changed. We have changed. We're all used to quicker, faster, stimulating things to look at and listen to and watch. And so we're really taking the world we live in and saying, how do we educate in that world?
Yeah, if you were to take biometrics, right, no different than they put on Whoop watches or Apple watches or whatever, you could measure their heart rate, their heartbeat in human, like in anybody. Mm-hmm. And you could see are they nervous here? Is this on their nervous system? Like when they go to take a test, does their heart rate start to increase? And I'm not saying you're going that route, but it is something because, human optimization is really important. And I guess if you could start from a younger age, starting to think about human optimization, lowering cortisol levels, all the things that happens through testing, I know it is part of our experience here on this planet, it seems at this point in time, but you're correct. Like we are evolving, the world is evolving, technology is evolving. It is not the same place we lived in, but it does make me feel more and more closer to the fact that we could be sitting in some type of simulated matrix, that we're on the other side of this experience right now in general. No different than what you're talking about, right? Like,
Right.
hey, you're going to go experience this game called life, and we're going to put you in this machine. We're going to check you're going to go into VR. You're not even going to know. It's going to be super comfortable. You asked to do this. We're also going to put on, these heart rate variabilities. We're going to put biometrics on you, and you're going to get so much information, so much data that you're actually going to forget that you're in this experience, but you're going to learn so much, and then you're going to be able to come back and have a whole different perspective on this world.
Who knows, right?
Yeah, it's just something interesting to think about, because it's no different than what you're doing. Now, the technology is obviously a lot more antiquated, what we're talking about, versus what I'm explaining, but
Right.
I don't think we're far off from there. If you look at the models coming out right now with video, we looked yesterday, my partner and I, we were looking through Instagram at a lady that she created like these really cool images, and then she started creating videos, and you could see as we were flipping up through the timeline, and we're not talking long periods, we're talking 6 months, that the models in the way that the people looked more and more and more real. And the eyes started to look real, and the hands started to look real. And you could see this evolution in 6 months. That's how fast these machines are learning. They're learning quick. GPT came out, or OpenAI came out. Now it's not yet available. They showed it, and so did Google, but it's not available yet, that you'll be able to put it on your computer, put a math problem up and say, explain this to me. Teach me, show me, like teach me as if I'm in 5th grade. I talked to a gentleman earlier before I had a conversation with you, and that was that he was trying to figure out some mathematical equation problems he's dealing with within his roofing company. It's like, I just don't understand this. And I says, hey, take that information, go into Claude or go into ChatGPT and say, you're an expert at mathematics. I need for you to explain this concept to me in a 5th grade level. And if you don't get the information there, then say, I need you to explain like I'm in kindergarten. And then it started to explain. It's like, oh, I understand what you're saying, but I don't get this. Well, ask the question. And so we're able to learn in a different way. And that's what I love more than anything about AI, is it helps people communicate what they are thinking. It helps people learn faster. It helps them get the accurate information. And it also makes things accessible, because for the most part, it hasn't been accessible. And a lot of people have used the internet as a way of entertainment. And if we look at it, it can actually be a way of education, right? If we know what we want to learn, if we can curate that information and that data, it can help us like actually evolve as humans. And now what you're doing is you're taking it from the youth side of things and saying, okay, we're going to help you move through here because we recognize you're bored. You've been sitting behind a desk for 8 hours a day. You're part of the system that was put into place to basically train factory workers to obey and to be worker bees. And we're now going to help you in this direction. How much innovation and creativity do you think is going to come from this? Because education sometimes stifles the creativity in children.
I totally agree. And I'm hoping that it will spark kids' imagination, interest. We'll be able to take them to places they couldn't go and to have experiences they normally couldn't have. And I'm hoping that the arts and innovation and creativity, we can help spark that in kids, because I do agree, you're rewarded for conforming in school, right? Conformity is what, schools are looking for, whether they want to think that or not. That is what gets rewarded. And so I think having innovation, having AI, having virtual reality, having access to technology, I'm hoping that it will help spark innovation in kids and creativity and new ideas and new thoughts that they wouldn't have had before. And back to your point on the AI, there's an AI program right now that can pick up if a kid by their facial expression is frustrated, doesn't understand, is confused, or is excited by something. Like I'm hoping that we can expose them to subjects and places and adventures and things that really build excitement and interest and engagement there where kids haven't felt that before.
Yeah, what would it be like to go backwards in time, to take my little boy self and go sit and have these experiences? I remember when Nintendo came out and, was so excited to get this Nintendo and play Mario for the first time with this controller that was like a box, you remember?
Right.
Like this little box that you'd play with. And I know some of the listeners have no idea what I'm talking about. The viewers at home are like, what is he talking about? I'll have to go look that thing up. But to go from that to where we are now and to think about like where we could be in 15, 20 years. I think the side of human evolution is so fascinating to see what we can do when we co-create with source. And I think of technology as light source. And so light source equals life force because it gives us life to make things easier and more accessible to us so that we can expand our experience and our human consciousness here. And it is fascinating to see where we may be in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And, when we first had this conversation, I thought about, wow, what if there's there's so many people that unfortunately have been left behind in the system.
Right.
Like think about how many people can't read, how many people don't have emotional intelligence, how many people are suffering through so many different learning disabilities that the school system says, hey, listen, you're either not smart, you can't pay attention, you can't do these things, so we're going to give you a pill. And what I've noticed is a lot of those people that they gave pills to are now a lot of times the people that are they have a lot of addiction problems, they're in prisons because of some of those early systems. And I know people are doing the best they can, and I know that we're doing the best we could with medicine and doing the best we could with, trying to control the classroom and all these things. But a lot of times teachers, they're just basically glorified babysitters a lot of times. And I'm not saying that they don't teach, but I know many teachers that they don't actually get to teach because they're dealing with so many behavioral problems and things are going in at home. And so if we could take those people that had gone through all those experiences, never got their high school diploma, and do like virtual reality GED, you know what I mean? Not say here's a test, but let us educate you. And the greatest thing that I'm thinking about as we're having this conversation is one, that education, the only cost is going to be long-term once the development is paid for, meaning the development of the software, the development of the education platform and the curriculum, that it doesn't cost anything. Like it just runs on servers. And so you could give that away to the general public as a way, and could be subsidized obviously by the government, but could be given to the public to get them so that they at least can get their GEDs and move forward that way. And I would even say in colleges are also antiquated as well. So it'll be fascinating for me to see what happens as these children move forward in their development experience.
Right. And I think that speaks to the school system as it is right now. There's certain kids that it works well for, right? There are certain kids that it works well for, but there's a lot of kids that it doesn't. And they haven't had success and they haven't felt like they are smart. They don't feel like education is for them. Learning for them has been a negative. We're really hoping that with virtual reality and with technology and with innovation, that we can find a way to make education exciting for everyone. Because it is so interesting to learn about things as long as you have an interest in it. When we take a subject that is interesting to a child, then we can really expand on that. And all of a sudden you're learning and you don't even realize how exciting it is that you're learning because you're now in a different realm. But I think when kids don't do well in school, when they don't think they're smart enough, when they have negative experiences, then all of a sudden education and learning becomes a negative to them. And it's really hard to get them out of that mode and into something, where they think, no, I do have interest in things. I am smart. I have intelligence in this certain subject. So we're really hoping to capitalize on that and help kids really find where they have interest and that learning can be interesting to them. And I love the idea of taking kids who have really not done well in the system and have really felt discouraged and haven't gotten to where they need to be. We're really hoping that with virtual reality, we can bring them up to speed and help close that achievement gap.
Yeah, so you've got a lot of kids that have behavioral issues. You've got a lot of kids that are being kicked out of schools. You got a lot of kids that are trying to find their way, their place in life, their belonging. And it'd be really interesting instead of putting these kids, into other behavioral schools, that they were able to just go into an environment where they can learn. Because for myself, learning wasn't something that was easy. But once I was able to gather certain things, once I was able to learn in the way that I learn, which is experiential, which is learning something and making sure that I put it to action quickly, which is not being told how to do something, but just simply being curious. Anyone in my life will tell you I love to learn. I love to experience the world around me. And once I learned that part, I was like, oh, I actually love to learn. Now, there's certain things I don't like to learn because it's not so much, it's my brain doesn't seem to be able to connect the dots. Doesn't matter how much I seems to try to do that. They just don't seem to connect those dots somewhere in my brain. And so I'm like, okay, instead of focusing on all the things I'm not good at and trying to just get better and better and better and putting all that energy into something that really has not an extreme amount of positive uptake in my life or uptick in my life, I focus on the things that I know I'm good at, and I put my energy into those places and do my best to become the world's best at those types of things versus trying to always, polish, which doesn't need to be polished because there's other people around me that are smarter about that. I think Henry Ford said something to the fact of that he didn't need to be the smartest guy in the room. He simply just needed to have the smartest people in the room. Mm-hmm. And there's something about that I think that I wish my younger self would have known, because then I think I would have maybe enjoyed education. Maybe. But it was the teachers that actually made me love education. It was the people that believed in me that made me love certain parts of education. It dove me, or I was able to dive deep into philosophy. I was able to dive deep into art. I was able to dive deep into, sociology and different formats of the world, and that I wasn't even aware of, right? That level of curiosity was able to expand because I wasn't so focused on trying to learn something for the sake of being able to make people happy by putting an A or a B on my card. I was simply just learning because it was something that my soul wanted to do, because it wanted to expand, because I knew I was going somewhere else. And I had to have the education behind me to be able to see the map where I was going.
Right.
Or at least to be able to navigate that. So
I think you bring up a great point. We all have interest in learning. We really do. It just depends on the subject, right? Or the circumstances. And I think, the way our public education system is set up, we do need to teach students in every subject. That's how it is set up. But we also want to really capitalize on kids' strengths, because we all have things that we are naturally good at, things that we are naturally drawn to, things that we're naturally interested in. And so we're hoping with VR to have some flexibility to really let kids explore those things that they're excited about, that they're interested in, that they're curious about. And so we will teach kids in all of the core subjects that they need to be taught in, but we also want to leave room for exploration in those subjects that they just feel called to. They feel interested in, they feel drawn to, whatever that is. I think there's not enough of that in education where we really realize there's things that we do find interesting. There are things that we find exciting. There's things that we really want to learn about. And once you find that interest and that curiosity, then we all love learning. We need to find the thing that we're interested in learning about.
Yes. And the other cool thing that I think is going to be amazing about this, to watch this experience, is that, say, for instance, you've got a little boy or a little girl, and some of the subjects that they're learning, their friends might be like, oh, that's for boys or that's for girls. And I mean, I know that we live in a little bit different world this way with non-gender and a bunch of things that way. But I still think there is social pressure in a lot of ways, that oh, you don't want to take that class, or you don't want to do this thing or whatever. But if I'm in my own experience, it doesn't matter, because it's my own experience that I get to go through. So there's no people telling me what's good or what's bad or how I should learn or how I shouldn't learn. And that interaction then becomes something that is more of a self-discovery.
Right.
And we're all kind of having this self-discovery. I am very curious to see like where these children will be in the future. But because I built this platform to be able to learn, like just what we're doing right now, like I'm learning so much. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And when it comes to something that's in the back of my mind right now, which is friendship, because you brought it up. And so I'm like, okay, I have to have this question answered. You studied friendship, which I can see why that would go really well in school, because friendships are so important. Our community is so important. Our culture is so important because it shapes us, especially when we're going through very difficult times. Right. And it also molds us when we are looking for that community to come together with and co-create with and build with and change the narrative of things. From an educational side of things, a guy that didn't do any college really in his life, what is friendship if we were to open up a textbook and like, what does that mean?
I've had to answer that question a few times, and there isn't a really specific way to say what friendship is. It's a close connection with someone else. I've heard it called the family that you choose, the people you choose to be with, the people you choose to spend time with. It's having a positive experience with another individual, another human, and wanting to have more and more and more of those positive experiences. And so friendship is important for students. It's important for adults. It's one of the least studied relationships because there's been a lot of study on family relationships and also partnerships, romantic partnerships and other things, but friendship hasn't been studied that much. So as you know, I went to the University of Pennsylvania and got a master's degree in positive psychology. And while I was there, me and my partner did research in friendship. And it was really fascinating. And what we found, it's not anything that's going to be earth-shattering, but it is something to think about, that we all do better when we feel connected to people, when we feel connected to a community, when we feel like we belong somewhere. And so adult friendship is interesting because especially men don't put a lot of importance on it as a general rule. And so we studied like, why is that and what makes a good friendship? And so what we found is there's a few things to maintain a friendship. You need to have consistent communication. You need to have experiences together, shared experiences. So time together, really, and then to strengthen a friendship. And here's where it gets tough for some people is to really strengthen a friendship, you need to have friends who will support you, asking for help, being vulnerable, and also giving that support to others. So it's opening up, being vulnerable, sharing your insecurities, your challenges, even your great things in life, and having people there to support you. That's how you can really strengthen friendships. And it's really how we feel like we belong, like we feel like we're a part of something bigger than us. It's really interesting, even when you go to a grocery store, if someone recognizes you in the community, even though that isn't a close friendship, it makes you feel like you belong. Because now you've seen someone who recognizes you. You're like, this is a community that I belong in. And so one quick interesting thing, because you brought up, that men and women, there's differences. And one of the things we found in our research is that men tend to disclose more to their female friends than they do their male friends. And disclosure and vulnerability is a big part of friendship. And because of who knows why, society, norms, evolution, we don't know for sure, but men have a harder time typically opening up and being vulnerable, which makes it harder to form really close friendships. And so even in a workplace setting, men will disclose more to their female coworkers than they will to their male. And we don't know if that's because they feel more comfortable telling women or if women are asking different questions, more personal. Where your male coworker will say, "How's the game this week? Did you watch it?" Where a woman will say, "How are your kids? How is your mother who's had the stroke? How is she doing now?" Like asking more personal questions. Yeah. So it's interesting.
I personally don't care about the game. I don't care about the weather. I don't care about the game. I don't care about any of it. I care about how someone's heart is. I care about how they're feeling. I care about what's going on in their lives. because people don't know how much you care until you actually ask. You know what I mean? Or until you show it. I was studying the same thing in a different way, and that is that I've got friends of mine in life that I grew up with. We'd been around for years, and we had been through so many things since we were like really, small. I was like, why is it that I'm not connected to any of these people anymore? And so I started studying a little bit of it. And what I found is that human beings, as you said, experiences that when we have a close family friend that we've been friends with for years, we've been through all of these things. For a while, you stay in contact with someone that you leave high school with. And what happens is if you don't cultivate that friendship, someone leaves town and you say, oh, hey, John, like, it was really great to talk to you today and, catching up. And you talk about all the good times and what's been happening, right? And you can only do that so much. And then eventually it starts to go into the conversation of, well, I was hanging out with this guy, Bob, we'll say his name is, and we did this one thing. And then you're like, well, I hung out with this one guy and we did this one thing. And after a while, because there's not an actual thing going on between the two of them, they lose track because we're going to give our energy where our energy is needed. And so slowly it just starts to then, split apart instead of coming together. And I think that is something that is interesting. And I also noticed with men, the word love, like I love you, is really like, I don't know, bro. Like I have a friend of mine, and he'd always say, I love you, no homo. And I was like, excuse me? He's like, yeah, no homo, bro, but I love you. I was like, well, I'm not into men. And if I was, that's okay. But like, I'm just not into men. And he'd say, oh, but just no homo. And then so it took me a long time for him to say, like, I love you. Like, this is not conditional. It's not about sex. It's not about relationships. This is about a relationship between two men that get to be vulnerable and speak our truth and know that this is a safe place to express those things. Because men, for the most part, are suffering silently. That's why I think we see a lot of suicides in men, but they're suffering silently, so they don't really get to speak of those things. But once you kind of crack that open a little bit, now all of a sudden you've got someone that's very loyal because they're coming to you with what's going on, but they're also loyal because they understand that like you see them and it's not some exchange of energy because I'm your friend to see what I can get. I'm simply your friend because of who you are.
Right.
Because likeness attracts likeness. And so the more that you're able to amplify somebody, I believe, or you're able to amplify each other, I think that forms a really good bond, a friendship. Like, and I've noticed a lot of times in friendship between women and men, a man will come to you and say, hey, this is my problem. This is what I'm dealing with. And you say, and I'm like, okay, so you want advice. That's actually what you want. You want to fix the problem. They're like, yes, great. You give them the information that they've asked for. They either do it or don't. If they come back a second time and they say the same thing, dudes are like, bro, I'm over it. We're not talking about this anymore. Like, it's done because we gave you a solution. This is a problem. We're moving forward. Women, in my experience, will say, I have a problem. And then men will say, well, here's how you fix it. And they'll say, no, I don't want to actually fix it. I just want you to hear me that this is what's going on. You're like, I know, but let's just fix it because like, that's cool. You want to talk about it, but let's just fix the situation. And then they come back and they do the same thing. You're like, no, let's just fix the thing. And so I think that's the difference between women and men is because we communicate very differently. And for men to be vulnerable, not that it's easier for women to be more vulnerable. I'm not saying it is or isn't. I don't know evolution why that women seem to be a lot more vulnerable with their feelings and emotions than men do. But I know it's a lot harder for men to be more vulnerable. I don't know if it's because they were taught that or if it's because it's something naturally in us because maybe it's a war type thing, from evolution or something. I don't know. You're the researcher on these things, but it is, it's just staying in the question of wonder for me all the time of like, okay, what is really going on within human beings and how do we create these friendships? Because for men, it is difficult. But for men, I think it's a bit different as we just say, I'm going to go do said activity. You like to do said activity? Cool, let's do that thing. And now we're friends. Like it's different. There's a different kind of bond there because it's like we're friends because we just do the same things together and we happen to be in the same space. And women are very different than that. So
yeah, they say men's friendships are typically shoulder to shoulder and women's friendships are face to face. So, and I'm talking in stereotypes,
yeah, I know we are.
of course, because a lot of men have close friendships and, and some women don't have close friendships. But as a general rule, women tend to be a little more vulnerable and a little more forthcoming with their feelings, their emotions, their challenges, their successes, all of those things. And, as we see, as we're talking about students, I think we're starting to see more of that changing a little bit, where it's okay for men to have feelings. It's okay for men to have fears. It's okay to talk about those feelings and those fears. I think some of it is societal. I think there could be evolutionary reasons for it. Where they had to protect the tribe and kind of had to make sure that their families were safe, and so other men were a threat to that sometimes. So I think there could be some evolutionary roots in this. But I think as we get more progressive in our thinking, and as men get more open-minded to being vulnerable, sharing feelings, forging close friendships, I think a lot of men are okay, kind of the lone wolf mentality. Like, I don't need other people. I don't need anyone else in my life. I'm fine, just me. And while that might be true in a lot of ways, community and friendship and support from each other really enhances our life and typically our well-being. So I don't think we can look at that and say we couldn't all use some close friendships in our lives, And so as we're looking, going back to the VR, definitely friendship and connection and community is going to be part of what we're trying to build, because I know the importance of that for our own well-being, for our own, for our own good life. We need connections. We need other people. We need to share. So
because as we share, it's the expression of who we are, and then we get to hear who they are, and then we grow and learn, and we feel seen and feel heard, and feel felt.
Right.
we have impact in our existence and in our meaning of who we are. And speaking of like who we are in our existence, so the thing we're exploring here the most is spiritual capitalism. So you do mergers and acquisitions, and you're involved in the business world. And I know that there's something higher that is usually pushing us to bring something into the world or to birth it, right? Like in a startup, you're birthing this thing into the world. You're not just walking into somebody else's kids and saying, okay, I'm gonna take care of them. No, you're actually forming and building this new thing. What does the word spiritual capitalism mean to you?
Well, I think we don't take into account sometimes our own knowing. We talked about this. Like, there's something inside of us that helps us to know if we're going on the right track, if we're drawn to something, if we're pulled to something, if we feel called to something. I have felt called to education. I have felt called to innovation in education. I've felt called to well-being, for helping students and adults feel better, do better, be better, So that's been something that I'm called to. But I think we don't think about that enough in business, and I think we don't think about that enough in our day-to-day lives, that there's something bigger than us. There's something that can pull us to something, or things kind of just fall into place to get us down a path. It was really interesting, even when I decided to go back and get my master's degree at the University of Pennsylvania, I felt just really drawn to it. And it really didn't make sense. I was in mergers and acquisitions, it was like, how does this apply, and what am I going to do with it afterwards? But it was really the education piece that drew me to it, because I felt like we weren't focusing enough on the well-being of our students. And I knew so many kids were suffering. And even in my own family, I've had that, just we have this crisis of mental health, and we have so many kids with anxiety and depression and suicidal ideology and some things that just are so alarming and so concerning. And I felt so drawn to that. And when I looked at it analytically, it didn't really make sense to go, or maybe to put it off for another year. And all of a sudden, 3 weeks before the deadline to apply, I couldn't think about anything else. It just became an obsessive thought. And I just have been in that spiritual realm enough to know when you feel something that strongly, when it's all you can think about, when it becomes an obsessive thought, you've got to act on it. And so I did. I applied. I mean, I was writing the essay at 11. I was finishing the essay at 11:55 p.m. on the night it was due, and sending in my essay at the very, very last minute to apply. Because I just knew, even though in paper it didn't really totally make sense, and career-wise it didn't totally make sense, but I just felt drawn to it, and I just felt like I had to do it to even know. I just couldn't let that feeling go.
So
I couldn't let that thought go.
You listened to that prompting, and so a lot of it for you then is when it comes to creating and building and doing what it is that you know that you need to do is you're listening to that form of prompting. So a lot of it for you in spiritual capitalism is listening to the prompting to follow your path that you know that you're supposed to be on, especially if it seems like it's nagging and it becomes obsessive. That's your sign to move forward with that. With your education, with the VR system that you guys are building out in the charter school, what's your promise to the students and the teachers if they decide to take this journey with you? Or what's your promise to the students and their parents if they take this journey with you?
It's that you are going to be trailblazing. You're going to be taking a different path, and we feel like it's going to be a better path. And we know it's going to take a curious mindset. It's going to take a growth mindset. You're going to have to be open to innovation and trying something new. But we have to have trailblazers in this world. We have to have people willing to take chances. We have to have people willing to be first. And so that would be my promise, is that you come on this journey with us. We are trailblazing, but we may be blazing the trail for everyone else to come on. We may find that this is a better way to educate, that this is a superior way to learn, and you can be on that journey with us. And you can be on that, you can be forging that path with us.
That's excellent. So when you've reestablished and changed the educational system and you look back in your life and you're no longer here, like your body is to rest and everybody looks back on your experience here on this earth, what do you want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered for making life better for other people.
That's a purpose. That's a really good purpose.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you coming out today and explaining to us everything about what's going on in the side of education for VR. And I appreciate you being a trailblazer. I appreciate you listening to the prompting, and I appreciate what you're right now taking this experiment on to help better children and better their families and their social awareness, and forming these friendships that could last a lifetime, especially if they could stay connected in VR. So.
Right? It doesn't matter where you are.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for coming out. And if anybody wants to find out about your program, if they want to have their children enroll today and start to go through this path with you, how do they do that?
You can find us online, virtualhorizonsutah.org. And if you Google Virtual Horizons Charter School, you'll find us. And we'll be coming around in your communities, hopefully. And we'll try to get the word out the best we can. But there's definitely, they can reach out directly to me.
Excellent.
But we definitely will have ways to get the word out. But we'd love to have students who are willing and able and interested in trying something new. So, and thank you for having me, Dalton.
Yeah, and I'm thinking. So my business mind it kicks in sometimes, and that is that right now this is available and will be available in Utah in 2025. And who knows, there may be franchise opportunities, there might be all kinds of things. So if you're thinking, hey, this could be great in my city, my community, and we want to be part of this trailblazing experience, I recommend that you reach out to them and see what they can do. Before we go, is there any last thoughts you have to leave with the listeners of anything that's really kind of percolating in the back of your mind that we haven't talked about?
I just think that what is working today might not work tomorrow. So I think it's always good to be curious and to be open-minded. And that's what I try to face every day with curiosity and open-mindedness, because that way we're always growing, we're always evolving, and we're always finding a new and better way to live our lives.
We will leave it with that, because that is something I live by on a daily basis. So thank you again for people tuning in and watching the Spiritual Capitalists today. And again, if you want to learn more about VR, if you want to learn more about VR education in your community, I highly suggest that you look them up. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right.